Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
It's the coldest night of the year. The outdoor temperature is dropping fast, and inside your apartment, the radiator just went completely dead. You call your landlord, but they tell you, "Sorry, everyone is busy. We'll look at it next week." What do? If you respond with, "Oh, okay, please come when you have time," you are going to freeze. Being too polite in English can sometimes work against you, especially in a real-life emergency. To get fast action, you need to know how to use pressure words, firm, professional English that forces people to take you seriously. In today's story, The Winter Without Heat, we are following a tenant who goes from freezing and ignored to master negotiator. Through 10 chapters, you're going to learn the exact vocabulary, phrasal verbs, and high-urgency phrases you need to handle difficult landlords, bad customer service, or any real-life crisis in English. Grab a warm blanket, hit that subscribe button, and let's jump into Chapter 1, The First Chill.
The transition from deep sleep to waking up usually happens slowly, but today, a sharp shock did the job instantly. A freezing breeze seemed to bite at the tip of the character's nose. They pulled the heavy duvet tighter around their shoulders, trying to hold on to the fading warmth of the night, but it was a losing battle. The air inside the bedroom felt strangely heavy, crisp, and completely frozen. With a deep sigh, they finally sat up and gasped. A faint white cloud of mist escaped their lips. They could literally see their own breath inside the apartment. Panic started to set in. They threw off the blankets, threw on a thick winter coat, and hurried into the living room. The large old metal radiator sat silently under the window. They approached it slowly, extending a hesitant hand to touch the metal surface. It was ice cold. There wasn't even a faint hum or a drop of residual warmth coming from the pipes. Outside, the morning sun offered no comfort. The thermometer outside the window read a brutal 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The radio on the counter was broadcasting warnings about a historic winter cold snap hitting the city. The apartment was rapidly turning into a giant refrigerator. Sitting on the kitchen counter, the landlord's phone number suddenly felt like the most important piece of information in the world. The character picked up their phone, their fingers stiff and clumsy from the biting cold, and stared at the screen. They needed help, and they needed it immediately. The winter without heat had officially begun.
The character's phone screen glowed brightly, displaying the contact name Mr. Henderson, Landlord. Their thumb hovered over the call icon for a few long seconds, while their teeth chattered rhythmically. They didn't want to sound demanding or come across as a high-maintenance, difficult tenant. Taking a deep breath, they pressed the button and put the phone to their ear, listening to the long, empty rings. Ring, ring, ring. "Hello, you've reached Henderson Property Management. Please leave a message," a flat pre-recorded voice droned. After the loud beep, the character cleared their throat and tried to use their most polite, accommodating tone. "Hi, Mr. Henderson. This is the tenant in apartment 4B, and I'm just calling to let you know about a small issue. It seems a bit chilly in here today, and I think the radiator might be having some trouble warming up. If you have some free time later this week, could you maybe send a handyman over to take a look at it? No rush at all, just whenever it's convenient for you. Thank you so much. Have a great day." They hung up the phone, let out a sigh of relief, and felt proud of how incredibly polite and pleasant they had been. They made a hot cup of tea, wrapped themselves in a second blanket, and waited for the landlord to return the call. 2 long hours ticked by on the kitchen clock, but the phone remained completely silent on the counter. Meanwhile, the freezing outdoor air continued to seep through the window frames, making the floorboards feel like blocks of solid ice. The hot tea had gone stone cold in minutes, and the temperature inside the living room was dropping rapidly by the hour. By midday, the realization finally hit them like a splash of freezing water. Their polite, passive message had completely failed. By minimizing the problem to avoid conflict, they had accidentally signaled to the landlord that this dangerous situation wasn't urgent at all. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the apartment felt less like a home and more like an icebox. The characters' hands were so stiff that typing on their phone felt like an absolute chore. Realizing that their polite approach had netted 0 results, they wrapped a heavy scarf around their neck and opened a web browser. They typed a simple question into the search bar: "What are my legal rights when the heat breaks in the winter?" Within seconds, an ocean of official housing articles and tenant advocacy blogs flooded the screen. As they read through the legal codes, they discovered a crucial term that changed everything: the implied warranty of habitability. This legal concept meant that a landlord is legally obligated to provide a safe, livable environment, which includes operational heating during freezing weather. According to the local housing laws, a lack of heat during a major cold snap wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a full-blown housing emergency. The articles explicitly warned that using soft language, like "a small issue" or "whenever you have time," gives landlords an excuse to delay repairs. To get immediate action, the character realized they needed to swap out their passive vocabulary for high-impact pressure words. They grabbed a notebook and began writing down a list of firm, professional terms that carried real legal and psychological weight. Instead of saying, "it's a bit cold," they wrote down the word "uninhabitable." Instead of asking for a favor when you're free, they jotted down the phrase "immediate attention required." They also noted terms like health hazard, material breach of lease, and unacceptable delay. These weren't aggressive insults, they were precise professional terms that signaled the tenant knew their rights and was documenting everything. Staring at the list of words, the character felt a sudden surge of confidence replace their freezing anxiety. They practiced saying the words out loud, letting the firm phrases roll off their tongue until they sounded natural and absolute. It was time to make the second call, and this time they were not going to ask for a favor, they were going to demand action. The character took a deep, steady breath, watching another small cloud of mist escape their lips before dialing the number again. This time, the phone didn't even manage to ring 3 full times before a hurried, distracted voice picked up. "Henderson Management, what is it?" the landlord barked, the sound of loud papers rustling clearly audible in the background. The character squeezed the notebook in their hand, their eyes locking on to the first bold pressure phrase they had written down. "Mr. Henderson, this is the tenant in apartment 4B, and I'm calling regarding a critical emergency that requires your immediate attention." There was a brief pause on the line, the rustling papers suddenly stopping as the landlord picked up on the shift in tone. "Look, 4B, if this is about the radiator again, I got your message earlier, but I've got a dozen properties to manage, and it's a busy day," he grumbled. "I understand you are busy, Mr. Henderson, but the complete lack of heating has rendered this apartment entirely uninhabitable," the character stated firmly. "The indoor temperature has dropped below 50 degrees, which poses a direct health hazard during this historic cold snap." "Well, it's a major storm, so you just need to bundle up and be patient. I'll have someone drop by sometime next week," the landlord countered dismissively. The character refused to back down, drawing strength from the legal facts they had researched just an hour prior.
An indefinite delay is completely unacceptable under our city's emergency housing codes, the character responded, keeping their voice calm but razor sharp. Are you threatening me? The landlord asked, his tone dropping into a defensive, guarded growl. I am simply stating the facts of the situation, and I need a firm commitment on when a licensed technician will arrive to resolve this issue. The silence stretched over the phone line for 5 agonizing seconds, the tension between tenant and landlord vibrating through the speaker. Fine, fine, Mr. Henderson finally muttered, his aggressive posture completely deflating. Let me check my schedule and see who I can pull.
The character held the phone tightly, waiting as the sound of papers shuffling resumed on the landlord's end of the line. Okay, look, 4B, I hear you, but my hands are completely tied here, Mr. Henderson said, his voice dropping into a defensive whine. This winter storm has caused a massive surge in service calls across the entire city, and every single plumbing company is completely booked solid. I called my usual technician, and he told me he can't get out to this neighborhood until at least 48 hours from now. So you see, it's out of my control, it's an act of nature, and there is absolutely nothing else I can do today. The character listened carefully, recognizing this tactic as a classic way to shift the blame and avoid paying for emergency services. Instead of accepting the excuse, they glanced at their notebook and prepared to use a high-level negotiation tool, Hind consequence framing. I understand that your regular contractor is unavailable, Mr. Henderson, but the responsibility to provide a livable space still rests solely on you. If you cannot secure your usual technician today, then I expect you to contact an emergency 24-hour repair service immediately. Those emergency guys charge triple the price because of the storm, and I am not paying those ridiculous rates, the landlord snapped back. The character maintained an absolute, steady composure, refusing to let the landlord's financial complaints dictate their physical safety. The financial cost does not exempt you from your statutory obligations as a property owner, the character stated clearly. If a certified technician is not dispatched to my apartment today, I will be forced to hire an emergency service myself and deduct the cost from my next rent payment. Furthermore, I will be formally filing a report with the City Housing Authority for a code violation, which carries significant daily fines. Hearing the exact legal and financial consequences laid out so professionally completely stripped the landlord of his excuses. He let out a long, defeated groan through the speaker, realizing that this tenant could not be easily tricked or brushed aside. All right, don't call the city, Mr. Henderson grumbled heavily. Give me 30 minutes, I'll find an emergency service that can get out there, but you better be home when they arrive.
The call ended with a sharp click, leaving the character alone in the freezing silence of the apartment once again. While the verbal agreement was a major victory, they knew that in the world of property management, spoken words mean very little without proof. If the landlord changed his mind or claimed he never promised a technician, the character would have no evidence to back up their claims. Sitting down at the kitchen table, their shivering hands typed furiously on the laptop screen to create a formal written record. They opened their email client and drafted a message to the landlord, carefully structuring it to serve as a legal paper trail. The subject line was clear and impossible to ignore. Urgent, formal notice of heating emergency, apartment 4B. In the body of the email, they summarized the exact timeline of the day's events using precise, objective language.
Dear Mr. Henderson, this email serves to formally confirm our phone conversation today, Sunday, at 2:30 p.m. regarding the total lack of heat. As stated, the apartment is currently uninhabitable, with indoor temperatures posing an immediate health hazard to the occupants. Per our agreement, you have committed to dispatching an emergency 24-hour repair service to resolve this issue today. Please reply to this email immediately to confirm the estimated arrival time of the technician. They clicked send, ensuring a digital timestamp was permanently locked into the system. Next, they took out their phone and sent a shorter, direct text message to the landlord's mobile number, referencing the email. Mr. Henderson, I have just sent a formal email outlining our agreement regarding the emergency technician for today. Please confirm receipt. 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed on the table, displaying a brief, reluctant reply from the landlord. Got it. Working on it now. The character smiled faintly through the cold, knowing they now held an undeniable paper trail that protected their rights. They had successfully shifted the power dynamic, transforming themselves from a helpless tenant into a fully documented professional negotiator.
The digital clock on the microwave shifted to 4 o'clock, and the natural light in the apartment began to fade into a dull gray twilight. Even though the paper trail was secure, the physical reality of the situation was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. The thermometer on the wall now read a grim 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and every breath out felt like a puff of smoke. Realizing that the emergency technician could still take hours to arrive, the character knew they had to transition into survival mode. It was time to bundle up and hunker down before the indoor temperature dropped any lower. They went to the bedroom closet and pulled out their heaviest winter gear, thermal underwear, thick wool socks, and a heavy fleece hoodie. They pulled a pair of insulated gloves onto their stiff fingers and wrapped a thick wool beanie tightly over their ears. Next, they tackled the living room, dragging every extra blanket, duvet, and throw pillow off the bed to create a makeshift nest on the sofa. To keep the freezing air from circulating, they closed the doors to the bathroom and kitchen, isolating themselves in the smallest room to preserve body heat. They even took rolled-up bath towels and stuffed them tightly into the cracks beneath the front door and window frames to block the icy drafts. As the apartment grew darker, the characters sat huddled in their lairs, feeling a wave of deep frustration wash over them. It was incredibly unfair to suffer in a home they paid good money for simply because a landlord wanted to save a few dollars. However, instead of letting the anger turn into useless panic, they used the time to mentally review their strategy. They looked back at their first polite voicemail and compared it to the powerful, professional emails they had just sent an hour ago. They had stood their ground, spoken with authority, and successfully forced a negligent landlord to take action. Suddenly, a loud, heavy knock vibrated through the front door, breaking the freezing silence of the room. The characters scrambled out of their blanket nest, their stiff joints popping as they hurried to the front door and threw it open. Standing in the hallway was a man wearing a heavy canvas jacket, carrying a large rusted metal toolbox that clinked with every movement. "Hi, I'm Marcus with City Emergency Plumbing," he said, blowing into his gloved hands to warm them up. "Henderson sent me over about a dead boiler?" "Yes, thank you so much for coming out in this weather," the character replied, stepping aside to let him into the freezing apartment. They led Marcus straight into the utility closet where the main water valves and the apartment's individual heating unit were located. Marcus knelt down, pulled a flashlight from his pocket, and began inspecting the complex system of pipes and dials. The character stood close by, determined to advocate for themselves and ensure the job didn't get postponed until tomorrow. "Looks like your pilot light is completely out," Marcus muttered,
tapping a small glass window on the front of the unit. "Is it just a simple matter of relighting it?" the character asked, hoping for a quick and easy resolution. "I wish," Marcus sighed, shaking his head. "The thermocouple, the safety sensor next to the flame, is completely fried, and the intake valve is jammed shut. Because the valve is stuck, the system isn't getting any gas, which is why your thermostat upstairs isn't responding at all." "Can you fix it today?" the character pressed, using a firm tone to ensure the technician understood the gravity of the situation. "Well, I have a spare thermocouple in my truck, but this specific intake valve is an older model and I might need to order it." "Marcus, leaving this system broken today is not an option," the character stated clearly, maintaining eye contact. "The indoor temperature is already 45 degrees, and the pipes are at risk of freezing and bursting if we leave it like this overnight. Is there any temporary workaround or an alternative valve in your truck that can safely get this system operational today?" Marcus paused, looking at the character's determined expression, then looked back down at the rusted metal unit. "You're right about the pipes," Marcus admitted, scratching his chin. "Let me go check the truck. I might have a universal bypass valve that can get you through the storm."
Marcus returned from his truck 10 minutes later, carrying a brass component and a heavy pipe wrench. He knelt back down in the utility closet, his tools clanking loudly against the old metal framework as he went to work. The character stood by the doorway, watching intently as the technician carefully replaced the fried sensor and forced the jammed valve open. After 20 minutes of intense wrenching and adjusting, Marcus reached down and struck a long match, holding it near the base of the unit. With a soft, muffled whoosh, a bright blue flame burst to life behind the small glass window, illuminating the dark closet. "There we go," Marcus said, wiping his greasy hands on a rag as he stood up. "The pilot light is holding and the gas flow is steady. Go ahead and check the thermostat in the hallway to see if the signal is connecting properly." The character hurried to the wall monitor, clicked the interface, and set the target temperature to a comfortable 72 degrees. A second later, a deep, rhythmic vibration rumbled deep within the walls, followed by the familiar, beautiful sound of whistling pipes. They walked over to the living room radiator and placed a hand near the metal. A wave of glorious, radiating heat was already blooming into the room. The relief was instantaneous, washing over the character so powerfully that they finally let out a breath they felt they'd been holding all day. They thanked Marcus profusely, signed his service sheet, and watched him head back out into the freezing winter night. As the apartment rapidly began to warm up, the character shed their heavy coat and beanie, feeling an immense sense of personal satisfaction. If they had stuck with their initial overly polite approach, they would still be shivering in a freezing room, waiting for a call that would never come. By mastering the right pressure words and standing their ground, they hadn't just fixed a broken heater, they had successfully defended their basic rights.
With the radiator now giving off a steady, comforting warmth, the characters sat down at their desk in a comfortable t-shirt. The freezing crisis was over, but the lesson they had learned today was far too valuable to keep to themselves. They opened a fresh document on their laptop to compile a master checklist of emergency English for tenants and consumers. They titled the document, "The Pressure Word Blueprint: How to Get Action Fast." In the first section, they created a contrast chart to show how changing just a few words completely alters the power dynamic. Instead of using passive phrases like, "It's a bit cold," they wrote the high-impact replacement, "The property is completely uninhabitable." Instead of asking politely, "Could you fix this soon?" they inserted the firm command, "This critical emergency requires your immediate attention." They also added a section on consequence framing, detailing how to politely but firmly explain the next steps if a request is ignored. Phrases like material breach of lease and deducting repair costs from rent were highlighted in bold red letters. The character understood that these phrases weren't meant to cause a fight, they were tools to ensure professional accountability. They saved the document as a shareable file and emailed it to the building's community group chat to help their neighbors. Looking out the window at the howling winter storm, the character felt completely secure, cozy, and entirely in control. They had successfully transformed a miserable, freezing breakdown into a masterclass on self-advocacy and powerful communication. The winter without heat had ended, but their confidence in navigating real-world English challenges was just beginning.
And just like that, the heat is back on. But remember, the real victory here wasn't just fixing a broken radiator. It was knowing exactly how to speak up, use the right pressure words, and take control of a stressful situation. In English, being polite is great, but knowing how to be firm and professional is a superpower. Never say, "It's a bit cold," when you mean, "This apartment is uninhabitable." Don't ask for a favor when you have a legal right to demand action. If you want to review the exact tenant checklist we used in today's story, I've left it for you in the description below. Now I want to hear from you. What is the most difficult situation you've ever had to handle with a landlord or customer service in English? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved learning English through this story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out this next video right here for more real-life English survival skills. Stay warm, stay confident, and I'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.